All right. Okay, so welcome to this week's installment of the Cohort 27 RFA office hours. We do have exciting news today. We finally got the RFA approved and it's been released. It should have been emailed out to all of the state superintendents across, or LEA superintendents across the state. And we have now put it on the 21st Century website so that everyone has access. And I did try to email the announcement with the attachment to everybody who is on our listserv. So hopefully you've gotten that RFA and have started looking over it so that you could go ahead and start. Well, hopefully you've already started preparing for the competition, but so that you can just kind of see the details of the competition. I do want to point out that someone has already found a mistake. You know, we have eyes after eyes after eyes read over this thing so many times that I think there's no way that there could be anything wrong with it. But someone did point out that somewhere on page 7, it said it refers to us having 6 grant priorities, and we actually only have 5. So more than likely that was just a typo, probably from where, we copied over from last year. We did have 6 priorities last year, but this year we only have 5. And so please ignore that typo. We do just have the 5 competitive priorities. So far, that's the only one that somebody has pointed out to us, but that is an important one. So thank you if you're the person who has emailed us about that. Thank you for finding that and pointing it out. Again, this thing is, I think it's 94 pages long, and it's a lot. It's a lot to put together. It's a lot to review. And so we try to catch everything, but it just doesn't matter how many times you look at it. There's always going to be something that we missed. So thank you for finding that. All right, so if you haven't participated in one of these meetings before, it is very casual. I basically just try to answer any questions you may have about the RFA or about the grant. And so I'm just going to open the floor. You're welcome to either unmute yourself and ask a question, or you can put your questions into the chat and we'll go from there. So I'm going to open the floor to any questions you may have.
Good afternoon.
Hello.
Hi.
Good afternoon.
I have one question. Could you tell us how specific we need to be on Form 9?
Form 9. Okay, that is, let me make sure I'm correct. That's the multi-year plan, right? Okay. We would like you to be pretty specific. I know that's not very detailed, but and I know it's not a huge amount of space. But we do want you to be specific enough where we can understand your reasoning behind your objectives, your strategies and activities that you picked out that you're going to do with your students and how they tie to those objectives. And then, of course, what data sources and evaluation methods you're going to use. It's fine. It doesn't have to be like complete sentences and perfectly described, but it should be detailed enough where we can understand what your meaning is and your reasoning behind things. And it should match the other areas of the application where there's other areas in the application where it tells you make sure you put this into your Form 9. We tried to make sure we reminded everyone of that so that you didn't forget. But really this form just kind of helps us see how one thing flows into the next to make sure you really truly do have a good plan of how you're going to meet your program goals and objectives. Building off of that. Okay, so there's a question on Form 9 again. Do we change the percentages or leave them as you have them? So this year, we're going to leave the percentages as we have them. Okay, this is going to be like our starting point. And then in future years, if we need to adjust percentages so that you can show growth if needed, then we'll do that. But for this beginning year, we're all going to kind of start at the same, with the same numbers, same percentages, and same data that we're collecting. And then we may adjust that in years to come. Another question, do we use the goals and objectives on the form? Is that correct? And any additional ones that we may have? That is correct. So just to give you a little bit of background, we as a state are supposed to have state goals and objectives for 21st century as a state, and you guys are actually supposed to use those goals and objectives to develop your programs. And so that is why we have specific goals in place and objectives in place. In some cases, most of the time when we've been extremely detailed about specifically the objectives, so that would apply to performance goal 1, performance goal, let's see. Okay, so performance goals 1, 2, and 3, we have given you objectives for those because those directly align with the GEPRA measures that we have to report to the federal, the feds. The other performance goals, we've told you what the goals are, but you can create your own objectives depending on the needs of your students. So, for example, performance goal 4 is students regularly participating in the program will demonstrate holistic health and wellness by exhibiting positive self-awareness, social awareness, relationship skills, decision-making skills, and self-management. You'll take that information and create objectives based off the needs of your students. So you may determine that the way you're going to approach holistic health at your site is to focus on physical activity. So you're going to provide some sort of physical activities for the students to do. And so your objectives would be related to those physical activities you're providing. In the RFA, it talks about the pillars for holistic health and wellness. And you don't have to do something for every one of those pillars if it's not a need in your school or your community. You can just pick 1 or 2 pillars and create objectives based off of that. So this is where you can really tailor your objectives to meet the needs of your specific students. So hopefully that helped. Okay. So yes, if the percentages are given to you in the RFA in Form 9, then that is what we ask you to use for this first year. Okay. So in other words, and they're, to me, they're not extremely high. So in other words, for the performance goal 1A, you're going to use the objective that 50% of your students, your regularly attending students, will show a minimum of 10% growth from the beginning of year to the end of year on the district provided benchmark assessments in mathematics. Okay. All right. I love all these questions. Okay, let's see. Glad this helps. Good. All right, on page 24 of the RFA, under 8, partnership with school, do LEAs need to complete MOUs with each school we're writing for, or is this referring to CBOs and LEAs who are partnering together? Okay, let me go to page 24. Give me just 1 second. See what we're talking about here. Okay. Okay, so at the bottom, it talks about partnering with a school, and it says applicants and partners are required to develop a clear, specific MOU that articulates the role, scope of services, in-kind contributions, and funding to be provided to, and by each partner. It talks about the LEA superintendent and the principal of each school must sign the MOU. So typically in this case, when we talk about the MOU, if you're an LEA that's applying, you would not need to necessarily do this because you're not necessarily partnering with yourself. So this is really more applying to a CBO that is partnering with an LEA. Let me think of, there's another place in here that details what is required when it comes to MOUs. Let me find it really quickly. Give me just 1 second. it kind of breaks it down a little bit better. If I can find it. I want to say, okay, so if you go to page 49, where it talks about Form 3, it talks about how we have provided for you an MOU template that you can manipulate as needed to accurately provide a detailed description of your agreement between the subgrantee and your partner if you have partners. And then it says, upload a copy of all required MOUs for the proposed 21st Century Community Learning Center, including the following. So there should be an MOU between, okay, so yes, you do need to have an MOU between your 21st Century Learning Center and your LEA superintendent and principals. There should be an MOU. And so basically this is just saying, the reason we ask you to do that is so that there is a detailed plan laid out as to what is expected of both the school system or the school and what's expected of the 21st Century program. Okay. Again, there's not a transfer of money in this. It is just a formal agreement about what is supposed to be provided. Now, I know we also have the principals, we have a form that the principals are supposed to sign and a form that the superintendent is supposed to sign that kind of talks about what the expectations are for the superintendent and for the principal. But the reason why we also ask for an MOU is because you may have detailed items that you want to add to your agreement. So, so that later on down the line, let's say that you have an agreement with the school system that they're going to provide transportation to and from the 21st Century Learning Center. If you have that in your MOU, then that is something that is like grounds for you to stand on. If they come back later and say, no, we didn't really mean that. We can't provide transportation for your students, for the students later in the day for them to go home from their 21st Century program. Well, if you had that in writing in an MOU, then you have a stronger leg to stand on to say, look, when we decided to apply for this grant, we said that this was something that you were going to provide as the LEA, and so you need to honor that that commitment. And so that it also kind of helps us help you if it comes down to a situation where one party or another is not honoring their commitments, then we can kind of help have a conversation if need be. So that is expected. Also, if you have a co-applicant, if you're applying for the grant with a co-applicant to get those extra priority points, or just because you've decided that this is not something you want to do on your own and you want to apply with an applicant, you need to have an MOU between you and that co-applicant that details exactly what each of you are expected to do. Please remember that a co-applicant, it states somewhere in here that a co-applicant is expected to help write the grant. They're expected to help implement the grant. And when I say implement, I mean like weekly or part of implementing the grant, whether it's their staff is part of what helps work with the kids, whether they have people that come in and provide activities on a regular basis. This is not just we meet once a month to talk about strategies, or we meet once a month to talk about, data. That is not a true partnership. A true partner is going to provide weekly help in implementing the grant. Okay. So just wanted to point that out. And then also, if you have a non-LEA, which would be a CBO, and is partnering LEA, there would need to be an MOU between those two as well. Okay. So 3 MOUs should be, well, not 3. Probably, it just depends on what your situation is. If you are, if you're just applying and it's just your LEA and it's your 21st Century program, then you would just provide the 1 MOU between you and between your 21st Century program and your LEA. If you also are taking on a partner, then you would have 2 MOUs, two MOAs that you would upload. One between your LEA, the rest of your LEA outside of 21st Century, and one with your co-applicant. And then if you are a CBO, then you would at least have an MOU that you upload with between you and the LEA that you're partnering with. So
I have a
I
question.
know that's, yes, go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Cynthia. What's up?
Okay.
Sophia.
I missed your last meeting, and so I needed to find out for us, did any of the dates change? In terms of, I know the portal is open. I just have one question about that. And is it still due on February 27th?
No. So we've
Okay.
changed dates. We changed dates several weeks ago.
Yes. I missed that meeting.
So let me address a couple of things, and then I'll go back to the questions in the chat.
Okay.
We did meet last week, and someone did point out to us that the Cohort 27 application was up, but it wasn't supposed to be yet. It wasn't complete. It wasn't finished. The people that create our applications did not realize that they needed to make it private, and so we immediately had it taken down. And we're still working on getting that up to date. So if you were wondering where it went, we asked them to take it down immediately because it was still in process of being created. It shouldn't have been made public yet. We do plan to make it public on February 18th. We do think it'll be ready to go according to our schedule, which was February 18th. And on that day, we will walk you through how to put your application, how to do your application in EGAP. So it's just kind of a walkthrough of EGAP. A lot of you probably do things in EGAP all the time and know exactly what to do, but a lot of people don't. And so we're going to walk anybody who wants to come to that meeting, we're going to walk everyone through the EGAP process and explain how to actually create the application in EGAP. So the plan is still to go forward with the application actually opening in EGAP on February the 18th. And then the application itself, the due date will be March the 20th. We don't foresee that having to be changed again now that the RFA is out, and the application should open up when it was planned to open. So hopefully there won't be anything else that would hold us up in getting it and changing that due date again. So now it is March the 20th.
Thank you.
And always remember, you can refer back to the 21st Century website. We keep the most up-to-date information on the website, and so you can go to it to make sure, like I would always advise you go to it before a meeting or something, just to make sure that nothing has changed and that we still plan to meet. We haven't changed any dates that I know. As far as I can remember, we've only changed the dates one time, and we did that about a month ago, or maybe even longer, when we realized that it was going to take longer to build.
I was checking the calendar, which is what we went to yesterday.
Yeah.
And I can't remember if it was changed on the calendar or if it said the same thing. That's why I asked. So
yeah,
we did go to the website.
Right.
Iris, do you remember?
The calendar, I'm not sure if Kelly is updating the calendar that's on the website with Cohort 27 items, but I know what's on the Cohort 27 information tab. That's one of the tabs on the website. That should be where you find your most up-to-date information.
All right, I'll do that.
Yeah.
Thanks.
No problem. Okay, let me see what other questions we have. Page 32. I'm not really sure, Lindsay, what you were referring to on page 32. Oh, just MOUs, yeah. So there's, more information about MOUs. We have it in a couple of different places here. Okay. So stating they will provide CMP for the summer is something we would include in the MOU. Yes, you would. And a lot of times, if that's the case, you'll do an MOU. In some cases, you'll do an MOU with the CMP program from your LEA. So it just depends on how your LEA wants to do it. It could be one MOU that encompasses all of the different services that are going to be provided by the LEA. But I know oftentimes we will have a different MOU for like CMP and then that will be uploaded, and then we'll have another MOU that will be uploaded from like LEA Transportation. So it really just depends on what your rules and regulations are for your LEA as to how many MOUs you would need to create. We just want to see details as to who is going to be responsible for what. Also, just remember, the MOU templates that we provide for you guys are a template. There are suggested activities on there. Please make sure you read the instructions, because some of the things that are on there need to be on there. They're required. So for example, one that I can think of is that the vendor or the partner will make sure that any staff they have goes through the fingerprinted background check process. That one's a requirement and it shouldn't be taken off. Then there's other ones that are just suggestions. And so one is either, I can go and look and make sure I'm not telling you wrong right now, but I want to say, okay, so, and it says, okay, so if the bullets are italicized, those are your optional things. Those are things that you can get rid of if they don't apply, or you can keep them if they do apply. You can add more bullets. The more bullets, the better. We want details, okay? But then the items that are not italicized, they're just regular writing, those are the items that are required to be in that contract or that MOU. So again, just be sure that you read those carefully and that you take out things that don't apply, because I can't tell you how many times I've seen it where the vendor is fiscally responsible for the grant when that's obviously not correct. Hopefully you don't have a vendor that's in charge of all the fiscal parts of your grant. It's just, it was an option that they didn't take out. So be careful about that. Okay.
Amanda,
Yes.
I real quick question, because I've been working on my budget part, and I
Okay.
don't know. I mean, I'm sure every system's different as far as their specific budgets, but I know that we have a school in our district who got the grant last year, and the Form 1 is a little different this year in that it breaks down school year and summer.
Right.
So will it ever be asked on like our more like the budget that I fill out for my system that's more specific? Do those like summer funds and school year funds have to match what that Form 1 says? Does that make sense? Like, do they
Yeah,
have
it
to
does
be
make sense.
necessarily divided out summer
So,
and school year?
right. Yes, that does make sense. So there is another place where you'll have to fill it in the application where you will have to fill that information out. It'll be in the application details, which is not necessarily the budget portion, but it's the beginning where you basically answer all the questions. It looks very similar to that Form 1, as far as it breaking down summer and school year. And the expectation is that you would spend those amounts, the amounts that have been budgeted for you for the different things. Now, are we always perfect about checking to make sure to the penny you spent for summer what you said you were going to? Probably not. We probably miss that sometimes. Are we supposed to? Yeah, we're supposed to check it. But the reason why it's broken down is because a lot of times sites will have a lot more kids that participate during the summer than during the school year. And so the question kind of came up when we were doing this last year is like, well, what if the kids only come for the summer? Do they count as a regularly attending child for the whole year? Do we count that higher elevated number for the entire year, or do we just count it for a portion? And so that's why we split it apart so that you're calculating the amount separately for the two, because the kids that you're serving could look very different, and the number of hours you're serving them could look very different.
Yes.
So that's why we did it that way. Okay. Okay, next question. Is there an editable, I can't say that word. Sorry, editable? I don't know why my tongue is not working today. Is there a version somewhere that can be edited? Yes, we have already put that on the website, the version of the document that can be edited. is on the 21st Century website in that Cohort 27 tab. Someone mentioned that last week. There are multiple versions for some of the forms. So some of the forms actually have a fillable version. We tried to do that when we could, but do keep in mind that if you want to use that fillable version, you have to open it with Adobe Acrobat in order for the fillable part to work. If you don't have Adobe Acrobat or can't make that work, then you'll just have to do it the old-fashioned way and print it out and either type into it, use the Word version and either type into it or write into it, however you have to do it. But those are there. And then once the application opens in eGap, those same forms will also be in eGap in the related document area like they normally are for those of you who've had a grant in the past. But if you need to pull them now before the application opens up, you can pull them from the 21st Century website. Okay. All right. There is an updated timeline on the website, right? Okay. I'm not sure is it 2 p.m.? It says it shows 2 p.m. Okay, next question. Will there be a 5,000 character maximum in eGap? Okay. No, not that I know of. We thought that there was going to be one last year, and then there wasn't. You could type as much as you wanted to in there. So as far as I know, it will be the same way this year. We still kept the questions kind of split apart like they were the previous year. And the reason for doing that is the fewer changes we made, the faster that they could get it up and running. And so we tried to keep as many things the same as we could. So some of the questions you'll see will be like part A, part B, part C. I apologize for that. We did it that way last year because we thought that there was a minimum number of characters you could put in your answer box. And then it came to find out that people were able to put more than that. So they had made an update to the system at some point where you could put more than 5,000 characters, but we still went ahead and kept some of the questions in parts this time, just so that we were not making major changes to the application itself, which would have caused a further delay in it being released. So you should be good to go on that. Okay. Yeah, February 18th meeting on the calendar. It should be earlier for sure. I tried to make some
I
of
think
the
she said
meetings.
that 2 p.m. is what she was referring to.
Okay, yeah. So that would be next week's meeting. Okay. All right, that's a lot of questions fired out at the beginning. What else do we have? Who else has a question? Yep, next week's is going to be from 2 to 4. Oh, that's the eGap application portal training from 2 to 4. And of course, we will record it. So if you're not able to be there from 2 to 4, you can always go back and watch it afterwards. We'll try to make sure it gets posted pretty quickly. Okay.
Miss Amanda, if we're
Yes.
on this meeting today, would you recommend that we join again on Monday? I see on the calendar there's a 3:30 RFA meeting. Would it be necessary?
It is totally up to you. These meetings are completely optional.
Okay.
Sometimes we all just sit here and kind of stare at each other and nobody really asks any questions. And it's some people might say it's a waste of their time. And then
Right.
sometimes it's like it's been today so far and people are rattling out the questions like crazy and you get some good information. So it's really totally up to you.
All right. Thanks. Our district is closed. I just wanted to verify.
Oh, I gotcha. Oh, wait.
Thank
So what day is that? That's on.
We're actually closed Monday through Wednesday.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Adults or teachers
I
and
was trying
staff
to make sure I didn't
come
have
back on
something.
Thursday and Friday.
So I
Okay,
think
gotcha.
e-learning days.
I'm sorry.
Yep. The 10th. Yeah. Nothing on the 16th. I think at one time I had a meeting on the 16th that we moved it to the 18th. Maybe. I don't know. I know I had something scheduled for a holiday and I had to move it when we updated the calendar. All right. What other questions do you guys have? Sorry, dry mouth.
Amanda, just for budget planning purposes,
Mhm.
we happen, or do you know if anybody happens to have upcoming, like for next year, some of the PD opportunities? If we're, as we're putting in PD for our site directors and like the
Right.
national, I mean, like, I mean, I know
Like
we can look it
national
up, but
conference. Yeah.
yes, if anybody already has that kind of put together.
I don't know that if anyone has it put together for next year or not. I can tell you some names of some conferences that we typically say is okay. Um, I know there's like the Boost Conference, the National Summer Learning Conference. There used to be a really great conference that was ran by the U.S. Department of Education, but they're not planning on having it. Um, I don't think in 2027 either. So I don't think we're going to have it for a couple more years. Someone asked this at one of the other meetings. I need to go back and look because I always draw a blank on the different conferences. Um, Pretty much, if you Google, just beyond school hours. Of course, thank you, Lindsay. Lindsay's going to know all of them. She's so great. She's been doing this a really long time. Yep.
And then
And then
we'll plan
AC.
on, and
Go
we
ahead.
need to plan on ACA and
Yes,
Mega.
that's correct.
Okay.
So Mega is really just going to be intended for your program director and site coordinators. If they can't come, then we would just rather you not send anybody in their place, and we'll have another meeting towards the beginning of the year for newly hired site coordinators and program directors that aren't hired in time for Mega. And then ACA, we really encourage you to try to allow as many staff members that actually work with the kids to come as possible.
Mhm.
Admin staff can also come, but if you had to pick between the two, I would rather you fund your staff that works directly with students to come to ACA than necessarily, your program director or something like that. Not to say that one's more important than the other, but they really are trying to focus on best practices for working with students in after school programming and summer programming. And so we would really like the boots on the ground to be able to come and learn and be able to turn around those best practices to the students. And so we've even, if it even says in here that you can even shut your program, your after school program down during that time to enable your staff to come to that if needed. So that's one that we definitely want everybody to attend. And then there's the national conferences. Just keep in mind that national conferences are intended to be focused on after school or summer learning. And so there's a lot of great conferences out there that are, that can probably provide some really great best practices, some evidence-based learning practices, but it specifically says in the federal guidelines that they that out-of-state conferences really should be focused on after-school programming or summer learning.
One last on that topic. Do you know what day the 21st information will be at Mega?
Yes, so it'll be on Thursday, but there will be stuff throughout the week. So if your budget allows you to come more than one day, you're welcome to do that. Because it's the same price whether you're coming for one day or the whole week. Now, of course, travel expenses is going to be increased if you stay more than one day, but it just really depends on your budget and what it can handle and what you end up being granted. But there will be other after school programming topics throughout the whole week. So if you can come for the whole thing, you're more than welcome to do that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. And then someone asked where ACA was going to be at this year, and Lindsay Blevins put in the information in the chat. It's going to be in Gulf Shores, November the 2nd through the 4th, 2026. So that's going to be really, really good. And let's see. Okay, here's another question. Can 21st Century pay for the day school teacher sub if that day school teacher is a 21st Century teacher that attends the conference? Yes, you can do that. You sure can. All right. Okay, and then Lindsay put the cost in there for your budgeting purposes. Thank you so much, Lindsay. So ACA registration is $400 per person, and the rooms will be between $149 and $199, depending on the room selected. So I think the ones that face the beach are a little bit more pricey than the others, the ones that face the road. Yep, at the lodge. Okay. Does being a limited support school for AI or ARI count as part of the priority points? No, it doesn't. The only thing that is sort of similar to that counts for priority points is school improvement. If your school is has been designated as a school improvement school. So in other words, they're designated as a CSI. Now I'm drawing a blank. I hate when my brain goes crazy on me. SI, CSI. What's the other one that I'm trying to remember? Page 8. Let me find that one. TSI. Sorry, I knew I wasn't saying that right. CSI, TSI, or ATSI. It's been a long day, y'all. So that's the only thing that's sort of similar to, I think, what you're talking about. If the schools that you're planning to serve have been identified as CSI, TSI, or ATSI, then you can get those priority points. If you're unsure of of whether your school is, or the schools that you plan to serve are CSI, TSI, or ATSI, you can actually look that up on the Alabama Achieves website. You can look up the school's report card grade. We can go through that in another meeting if you guys need me to kind of walk you through how to do it, but it's pretty easy, I believe, if you just Google it. And it will tell you on that school's report card whether they have been designated as CSI, TSI, or ATSI. Thank you for those who were trying to help me out when I was having my brain freeze moment. And do know that we do look it up. So once all the applications have been submitted, that's one of the things that I try to do is go through and check for everybody who put that they qualified for that priority. I sit here and spend several hours looking them up and making sure that those schools have been designated as one of those, and making sure that they do meet that requirement. Fun times.
Since you're there,
Yes.
the next one, expanding services. It
Mm-hmm.
says, for proposed activities that are not accessible to students who would be served, so high quality services to meet the needs of the community.
Yep.
Would that include like our enrichment activities that we provide? Something outside of the box like garden club wouldn't be necessarily inner city, but if we have that and propose to continue that for next year, would that be at least worth 5 points? Something like that, or even what else was I thinking? 4-H club just got started here, and of course we hope to continue that next year too. So writing that into our plan, would that give us 5 points there?
Potentially.
Okay, potentially.
So one way so the couple of examples that you've given me, if it's something that you've already been offering, then that may not qualify you because it's something that the kids already have access to. But if in writing your program activities, you say that you're going to provide an activity that is not currently offered by your school or by the community, then it could definitely qualify. So usually an example of this that I give is, let's say that, and this is just the first thing that pops into my head, but let's say that in your community, there's only one golf course, and it is primarily used by people who are members of the club, of that golf club or whatever. And they have teachers that teach golf lessons, but again, you have to be a member of the club to be able to take lessons with those golf pros. But you say that you're going to bring in a golf pro to teach students how to play golf as part of your after school programming. They're going to come in once a week and they're going to teach for an hour, and you're going to pay them this much an hour, so on and so forth. Well, in your application, you would explain that the only opportunity for students to learn how to play golf in your community is if they are members of this club, which is very cost prohibitive. And so most students don't have access to learn how to play golf. And so you're going to bring in a golf instructor to teach golf to students who would not otherwise be able to take those lessons. That would be an example of that. I see somebody said, what about an art teacher? I'm assuming it applies to this question. That just depends. What level of art are you discussing? Is it art above and beyond what they could get in their normal school day? Because typically, as far as I know, usually there's some sort of art instruction that can be taken. I know it's usually like at the high school level, it's normally an elective, and so it may only be done once. But if you're providing them with something that they can't typically do or won't typically have access to, you can explain that in the grant. And what I would be very detailed, and I would also make sure I point out that this qualifies us for quality, for priority point number 4, because we are providing these services to students who would not otherwise have access to them. Another thing that people bring up often is like swimming lessons. We have a YMCA in our neighborhood. Again, students have to be a member of the YMCA to be able to go swim, and we're going to take kids to the local YMCA during the summer program twice a week for swimming lessons at no cost to the family or parents. And so that would be providing a service that maybe the students wouldn't otherwise have access to because it would be potentially cost prohibitive for them to take those lessons otherwise. So those are just a couple of examples. But again, I would make sure, we hire grant readers to come in and read your applications, and I would make it very clear to them what things that you feel justify you. What is your evidence for that you qualify for certain priority points? I would make sure, because we ask you what priority points you qualify for, and you kind of check a box in the application, but it doesn't ask for like written information where you check those boxes. So make sure that somewhere in your narrative, in your questions, that you point out that this information is my evidence that we qualify for priority point 3 or priority point 5 or whatever the case may be. Okay. And by the way, that particular priority point is a federally mandated priority point. So I know it's kind of worded strangely, and a lot of people are confused by that one, but it's one that we have to put into the application. It's federally mandated. So that's why it's in there. Even though I would love to word it, it probably could be worded more clearly potentially, but we have to make sure that it's in there kind of the way it's written in the federal guidance. So that's the kind of the background behind that particular priority point. Okay. I also want to point out, last year we did have 6 priority points, and one of those was giving points to programs that were going to have STEM as part of their weekly instruction. But please know that now that is a requirement of everyone. It doesn't necessarily say STEM, but it does say that you are supposed to provide some sort of weekly math or English language arts activities as part of your program, which STEM would fall under. So that's why we didn't give a priority point for that this year, because it's kind of a requirement for everyone. It's not necessarily a requirement that you tackle math through STEM, but that would definitely be best practices. Same with your English language arts. Doing STEM activities is a great way to incorporate both English language arts and mathematics and science and art into your program. So it's kind of one of those given things that we would love to see in your programs, but you're just not necessarily going to get priority points for it because it's going to be an expectation of everyone to include those in there. All right, I don't see any other questions popping up, but another thing just popped into my head that might be helpful. So, and it was the question about ARI that kind of made me think about this. So, we know that you guys are expected to do math and reading camps in the summer for specific students who may be struggling in math and reading. And we do want to encourage you that when you're developing your application, you can, there are ways to braid your funds so that you can provide a very well-rounded summer program for your students that does include those mandatory activities that you have to do that come from the Alabama Reading Initiative or the math initiatives from the state. But you can use your 21st century funds to provide additional enrichment activities that make the program fun, right? So not to say that the ARI and math activities that you have to do aren't fun. They very well may be, but I think some of them can be quite hardcore. And so we would love to see you incorporate more fun activities, ways to get kids up and running and having a good time so that they want to come to the summer program and so they get that math and reading instruction that they really need, but they also get to spend time with their peers, doing fun activities. They get to go on field trips and things like that. So it is encouraged for you to figure out ways to braid your funds. And when I say braid, I mean you can't necessarily throw your pot of money. You can't really throw all the different sources of money into one pot and just spend however you want to. But you can look at the requirements of each of those funding sources and figure out ways, well, I'm going to pay for this with my ARI funds. I'm going to pay for this with my OMI funds, and I'm going to use my 21st century funds to pay for transportation or to pay for, to bring in a sports teacher, to do some sort of summer sports program or there's a bazillion things that you could do. It's not even a word, sorry. But there's a lot of things that you could do to make your summer program really fun. And so that's what we want to encourage everyone. It shouldn't be a competition for the kids to pick which one they want to go to, which I know that one is not necessarily mandatory, but is encouraged for the kids who are struggling in math and English language arts. But you really can find ways to make the program fun for them as well. So we encourage you to try to figure out ways to do that. All right, I just rambled a whole lot. Surely somebody has a question by now. Okay. All right, the only thing I can think of that was asked this week outside of these meetings that I could share with you is someone asked if it's okay for a CBO, if you're doing a partnership between a CBO and an LEA, if it's okay for the CBO to be the fiscal agent. Let me find my answer to that so that I can kind of be consistent with what I tell everyone. Thought I had it pulled up already. Here it is. Okay. So it's a CBO that wants to partner with the school system, and the school system is on board, but they don't really want to have to do the fiscal part. They want to provide the space. They want to provide some support, but most of the program they would prefer for the CBO to run. And so that was the question: is it okay for the CBO to be the fiscal agent? And so my answer was yes. You know, a CBO can be the fiscal agent, but before moving in that direction, that CBO does need to take some things into consideration. They have to have necessary financial systems and procedures in place um, to manage a federal grant. And so it is very helpful if they have some sort of experience in federal grants, because the rules with federal money is different than some of the other money that CBO may have been given in the past. So they want to make sure that they have the ability to have those financial, have the financial systems in place and also procedures. Now, if they don't, as far as procedures goes, we can help. We have some templates that we can provide to help you develop financial procedures, but you do definitely need to be prepared to purchase the appropriate software and things like that to manage funds, manage federal funds sufficiently. And then also it states in the RFA that the organization should have at least 3 months worth of funds in an account that they can use to start their program until reimbursement starts. So just remember that this grant is a reimbursement grant. You start your program, you spend your funds, you submit an expenditure report, and then we reimburse you for that expenditure, for those expenditures. But sometimes it can take a while before you can actually start submitting your expenditure reports. You have to have a finalized approved application. And, so in EGAP, when you submit your application, just because you're awarded the grant doesn't mean that everything that's written in your application is perfect the way it is. Once we've said yes, the scores show that you are deserving of this grant, you've been awarded this grant, then we go and we look at your application with a fine tooth comb and say, okay, you've got this in here. This is not allowable. You're going to have to pull this out. Or that you've used the wrong object code or function code in your budget for this item. We go through all the different things that need to be fixed in the application before it is final approved. It has to be final approved, which basically means it's been reviewed by the state specialists and approved, and then it comes to me and I review it and approve it. And once I've approved it, then you can start drawing down funds. And so if you wait before you get that final approval, before you make the changes that you've been told to make, if you put that off and postpone it, you may get put into a situation where you need funds, but you can't draw anything down because you haven't gotten a final approved application. That's happened this year. It happens every year. So you've got to be mindful that just because you get that wonderful announcement that you got the grant, it doesn't mean that you're good to go and you can start spending money. You have to get that final approval from the ALSDE before you can actually start spending funds. Okay. So the question is, what software would a CBO need to manage a federal grant? That's a great question, and I have no idea what the answer to it is. If somebody in here would like to make a suggestion, we don't really see that part from my side of it, and I know very little about accounting. But if there, I don't know if there's any other CBOs that are on here that can suggest a financial program. If not, I can reach out to some and see what they use. But I'm not prepared to answer that question right now, right this second. I'm sure you could Google it as well, but I don't know much about that sort of thing, to be honest with you. And I'm not seeing anybody put anything in the chat. So but I'm going to make a note to reach out to some of our really great CBOs and see if they can recommend something for you guys. Okay. All right. The other thing I've answered, even though it really wasn't part of a question, but I feel like it's important for everyone to know, and please do not think I am trying to be negative towards our community-based organizations. I'm absolutely not. But I do want to point out that when we have issues with fiscal matters that cause grants to be out of compliance, a lot of times that does happen with a CBO, and it is because they aren't used to spending federal funds. They don't know the rules and regulations around spending federal funds. There's a lot of them. The RFA details in the first, I would say, probably the first 20 pages or so. There's details. Well, actually, if you refer to like page 12, all of these different federal regulations, and then also trying to think, Edgar, you would need to be able to refer to Edgar, but there's a lot of rules and regulations that go around federal funds that you need to know. And so a lot of times historically, and I say historically, even though I've only been with the program for a little under 2 years, but from what I've seen, a lot of times our CBOs have a hard time with the financial parts of 21st century. And so that might be a reason why an LEA might prefer to be the fiscal agent if possible. And it might be a better fit because our LEAs are used to spending federal funds, and they are more, they just have been doing it a lot longer and are used to it. And so they tend to make less mistakes with that. So that might be another thing to consider when you're trying to just determine who is going to be the fiscal agent, whether it's the CBO or the LEA. Okay, what is the average budget amount for 3 months working capital? Again, I don't know how to answer that question. It's going to depend on what you get, like what it's going to depend on a lot of things. It would depend on how many staff you plan to hire from the beginning. You are expected to begin your program on the first full week of school. So it actually, in the federal regulations, it says first day of school, but we did try to be flexible this past year and say the first full week, because we know that a lot of schools start their programs like on a Thursday or a Wednesday. So we said the first full week. And so you would need to kind of, what I would look at is, okay, how many staff do I need to have in place? I need to be able to pay them. What materials and supplies do I need to purchase ahead of time so that kids have something to do when we start our program? Like, those are all the things that you would need to consider. And it's hard to kind of give you a ballpark because it just depends on your situation. If you're a CBO, if you're like a Boys and Girls Club, you may have plenty of things to keep students entertained and to provide activities for those students for the first couple of months. You may not need to make any major purchases of equipment or anything like that. But on the flip side, you may not have hardly anything for kids to do in the afternoon, and you need to purchase some items, to get them started. So it's really just kind of depends on that. But once you start working on your budget and kind of mapping it out, then maybe you'll be able to have a better picture of what you should be able to set aside for the first 3 months. And again, if you stay on top of your financials and on top of your application, and because as soon as we say your application has been approved or not, pretty quickly after that, we give you feedback on your application and let you know what needs to be fixed in it. And if you do that right away, then you should be able to draw down funds pretty quickly. But if you wait or put it off, and then it's November or December, and we're saying, hey, we really need you to get your application approved. We need you to get those things fixed. then that's when you might get into a bind. So as long as you stay on top of things, then you may not need a full 3 months of working capital. Okay. All right, it is 5:30. So I believe it's time for us to end tonight's meeting, but I can stay on a few extra minutes if anyone wants to ask any questions. But other than that, I don't see anything else popping up. Other than that, then you are free to go for this evening. Our next meeting, I believe, is the February 18th meeting where we will go over the EGAP portal. Also, if you go back and review last week's meeting, I talked about how to see if you have access to EGAP. You may want to refer to that, especially if you're from a CBO who may have never had a 21st century grant before. Please make sure you go back and watch that, or that you read the information that's provided. Let me see what page. Just 1 second. Sorry. So on page 35 and 36, it talks about public access and submission requirements. And so make sure that you read through that. That someone, and if you don't have access to EGAP, that you go in, there's a link on page 36 that you can click on to go fill out a form for us to give you access to EGAP. So just want to point out that information, especially if you're a CBO who has never had the grant before. All right. Thank you, guys. Have a great evening. I'm going to stop the recording now.